Alright, so I created a master material for myself. I watched a lot of tutorials and I just combined best things from them into one master material of my own. So I have all these switches and parameters, they combine with each other, they work in accordance to situation I'm going to apply them to. Alright, so first of all we need to create a material instance from our material. We're going to apply it to this ball to see the results, and we're going to open this in our graph. So now let's start with UV. We're going to go through all of this. So normally UV, let me just also bump intensity of normal just to see UV better. So normally we can just adjust UV tiling of this texture uniformly. That's why it's uniformal scale, right? But also I have an options for individual scale. So I have individual scale for U and V independently. So if I want, I can just stretch it out. Then we also can offset them. So if I have some stone or some texture detail that I want to show up on the top or on a specific side, I can offset it by U or V. I also can rotate it back and forth, and I also can change rotation axis center and rotate it by that axis. On top of that, we can create an animation. We can make it move. So if we apply speed like 2.2, we cannot see it here, but if we check the texture on our world, we see it move by X axis. Also by Y, we can do that both. And we can speed it up faster. So that's UV, very simple. I have more controls for myself. And if we check the graph, that's the UV in purple. We have texture coordinates, which are then going to uniformal, one constant multiplied by this coordinates, and then it's added. So it's added with individual scale. So U and V, we take it from the coordinates by masking the channel. So it's masking red or green, U or V. Then we multiply by a constant one to have a control, and we append them together so we can have it combined back together. And then we add it on top of uniformal. And the reason is that we not only control one or another uniformly or individually, but we can control them on top of each other. So if I change the uniformal scale, I can also change on top the individual scale. So they don't override each other. That's very important. And then we have individual offset again, so that we talked about, we can offset the texture. And they all add together, so they've broken down, decomposed, and brought together again to continue on with the rotation by axis or simple rotation constant, and then we have an animation pattern which creates the motion. So speed, this time it's 3 constant, so we can have X and Y. And then all of these coordinates, after being adjusted, they all go next to all of the texture that we have here. Texture, speculars, base color, normals, and so forth. So that's what we're going to talk about next. Alright, so next in line is base color. Now, that's what it is, it's base color. But the thing is that we can either use the texture, just drag and drop in here, or we can just bypass the texture and just use the color. So we click that, it will not use the texture, but now what you can do, you can just choose any color for your material, select this, and then apply all settings. Also, if you want more than one color, you have that option as well. If you tick this, you can just have 2 colors instead, inner and outer. So if you choose outer, let's say purple-ish, and inner will be like, or outer will be blue, then you have another option, Fresnel ramp strength. That's what it is. So we can change the strength between 2 of them and create this fade, a ramp. So we have double color together, mixed. So if I go back and untick this, we'll go back to no, sorry, not this one, but we'll go back to the texture. But what we can also do, we can change the color of this texture and apply the tint. So first we need to, if we change the color, right, for the tint, we'll see nothing here, but we need to apply the amount, because amount is 0, there's nothing there, but if we raise it up, we'll create this tint, and now we can change the color, right? You can raise the strength of this tint color. Accordingly, on top, instead of the tint color, you can use hue. So you can, instead of that, you can change hue and change color that way, or on top of that as well, So then you can have a saturation. Let's bring that amount back. Hue, let's reset hue. Don't need that. Brightness, and contrast as well. So all of the settings. And again, if you change all of this, and then you decide, okay, I don't want to use texture, just click this. It's, by default, there's no for now. Then you have a base color, and then you change the base color, and you will still maintain all of the settings on top. Just instead of texture, you will use color. That's the whole thing. Let's go check on the graph. So we ended up in textures, right? The UV tiling. So where the one string where it goes to is base color here. It's here in pink area, and we have a texture. So this was an option, a switch parameter, which allows us to bypass the texture, and instead we use the base color. But if we want to use two colors instead, we also can bypass the one color by this another switch parameter, which uses two of them in lerp with the Fresnel strength. That's the Fresnel, the ramp effect, which used as alpha between them, so to fade in and out. And then we multiply it by brightness, so we blend over the tint color like an overlay on top, and use it an amount, like tint amount, so the strength of this tint color, like an alpha in lerp. And then we have hue, saturation, where it's desaturation, but I wanted to have a saturation, so it should be flipped. Instead of plus, it should be minus, or other way around. So when we raise it, we saturate it, but not desaturate it. At least for me, it's much more comfortable. And then there's a contrast by using the polymer node. Dirt add-on, we'll talk about it later. There are also two strings going down, we'll talk about it later. And then they just go to our base color, just like that. Also, there's another texture, this add-on, I'm not using it. It's like textures on top that allows to create these dirt layers, 3 layers, one on another. But I took it from somewhere, I don't remember, it was a long time ago. It's not finished, it's not perfect, so it's just there for me, just in case I will want to add it on in the future. So yeah, that's the base color. So the next one in line is normals, and if we turn it off, the intensity, it'll just be a flat surface. We can also change the texture if you like. By default, we use the texture that is here already applied, and if we bring down the intensity, it'll be nothing. But if we increase it, we'll see the strength of it being applied onto the surface, right? And it plays with the light accordingly. So now what also we can do, we have settings to flatten it out. So when we create intensity of it, we can also flatten it out. Just bring it back, but kind of fade it out, smooth it out. Then that's simple settings here for just normals. But if you want additional detail, we have a detail normal, like another layer which is put on top, so it creates a more kind of believable texture. So there's more to it than just one normal texture. So just double click this and we have more options. Now we can also apply another texture or use the default texture that we have the same here. So if we apply it, if you will not, because it is the same and it is not changed, it'll be very similar. But if we go to the beginning, to our UV, and we adjust our main UV settings, for example, when we scale it up, you see we have 2 textures now. Let's scale up the main texture and leave this second texture a small one, but increase this intensity. Now we can also flatten it, but we also have individual controls for detailed normal texture. the same controls as we have for the main UV tiling texture, but we have the same controls for separate normal, so we can separate them and control them independently. Same controls like it was before. So we can scale it up, we can uniformly or individually do that, rotate it if you want, and the fun thing is that you can create a motion to it, right? And then create another motion for a different texture, and you have kind of two textures moving around in different directions, creating, you can say, organic flow. Let me see, that was X, this will be Y, and if we check that, see, we have two textures moving to different directions. So that's fun. Now, so that's normal. Now let's check the graph. So from the main UV tiling coordinates, we have it go to our main normal texture, which then is separated to RG channel and B channel separately, and we only apply the intensity of the constant to our RG channel. I don't know why it's made that way, but that's what I saw in the tutorial. Don't ask me. That's how it should work. And then we connect them back together. We don't create intensity on the blue channel for some reason. That's the reason, I believe. And then we have this flatten node, which allows us to flat this, and we blend it with a detail texture. So when we apply detail texture, there's another texture of normal, but this one, as you can see, there's a string going this way. This is a complete the same settings, but just duplicated for it individually, so it can be controlled independently from the main UV tiling. And then it goes through the same settings, same nodes, but it does have this switch parameter, which allows us to choose either to use only one normal or another detailed normal. And if we don't use detailed normal, it just applies the flat normal instead. So we don't see it, just flat surface of another layer on top. And then it goes to a normal input here. That's the normal. Alright, now let's talk about specular, roughness, and metallic, because they all work with light. So specular is how much light and what is the strength of the surface that it reflects the light itself. So if it's less, we don't see any reflectance. If it's more, we see the reflectance on the surface. So there's multiplication and its power, so it's kind of a contrast thing. The power is, so you increase the reflectance. You can also switch and override this with much more simple settings, with just uniformly controlling the specular. There is specular or there is no specular. Easy as that. Now let's bring it back. Now the next thing is roughness. So we can apply the texture if we have, or we can bypass the texture and just apply it uniformly on top of the surface. And so we have roughness maximum and minimum. So if we lower it down, we increase the surface being more reflective, so it's less rough. If we increase it, it's the other way around. There's also a minimum, which they both work together. Let me check. I'm not sure how, but anyway. So for this reason, I have a specific roughness control, which is like a much more simple way, just uniformly controlling it up or down. So if it's reflective or not, and it works together with specular, so they complement each other. So the more specular it is, the more light it reflects, the less and less, but accordingly with the surface reflectance, if it allows it to be reflected, so to say. So we can either control it uniformly or not. Same with metallic texture, bypass texture, main, make it more metallic, and then control it uniformly by one setting instead, if you like that. So let's go and check the graph and see how it looks. So we start with specular. Specular doesn't have a texture. It instead takes the red channel from base color. So you can take it from here or anywhere here. It takes it and then works with it. So it isolates the red channel, it multiplies the color, So we can change the color. I couldn't see a lot of difference with color being changed, but probably it's there. Then we have a power, which is like works as a contrast. We have a multiply, which creates the strength of this specular applied. And we have simple settings, just one constant, and the channel, which allows us to choose either one, whether go with these settings or simple settings. So now let's go with roughness. It's blue. Now we have the texture that we can apply, but there's a very interesting switch here. It says use ARM texture instead of this texture. So sometimes maybe we will have just one texture file, or we can have like a ARM, which is ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic texture combined in one. So it will look like one texture, but each metallic and roughness and so forth will be put into a separate channel, right? So you can just tell, and you have to tell the system, the master material, if you use ARM texture or not. So it's done at the beginning, at the global setting. So choose this, use ARM texture instead. So you just tick it. And then if you have it, of course, you apply it. You just drag and drop it in here. And accordingly, it will work with all settings afterwards. So you'll not have an option to change the texture below for metallic. Instead, it will be here in ARM texture. Then I'm going to use this now. So, and the same is applied for metallic. Choose either one texture or take it from ARM texture. And the same is applied for ambient occlusion, right? So you can either take one or take it from this red channel of combination of them three. So let's continue. So we take this or ARM texture, and then we have another option which allows us to bypass the texture whatsoever. It doesn't matter which one. And the settings, we have the settings, and we have simple settings options, and you can choose either one with this switch. We'll talk about dirt later, and we go to the roughness. Same actually with metallics, the same settings. We take that texture, we have these settings, we have simple settings, and we go to the metallic. Now ambient occlusion is much more simple. You just need a texture to apply, and you can adjust strength. I don't have a texture now, so I have nothing to show, but that's how it is. And in the graph it's in the red area, so there's a texture that is taken. You can choose it up to either from IRM texture or just a individual texture. Then you have a strength multiplied, and that's it. It goes to the ambient occlusion. So the next one is dirt. It's like an additional layer of dirt on top of the surface. It's not necessary, but it might create a specific like an imperfection. It also can use a texture. So you need to apply dirt. Use dirt overlay. Just click it here, and you can use any texture you like. By default, that's the texture here, but you can change it, swap it. So here it is. Just appears on top. Then there's a channel. There's such an option that you can have 3 different textures in 3 different channels. So it's not necessary, but it's there in case you need this. And then you have dirt UV tiling size. So it has its own separate UV tiling settings. Now there's another option. You can bypass this texture UV tilings, different settings, and use a main UV tiling instead. The same UV tiling that we use for the whole surface of the main material. So if you click this, it will just follow along with this texture, and it will move along. So if you go to this main UV and you change it in any way, it will also affect the dirt, right? Like if you untick this, it will have its own UV tiling settings, but it's simple settings. There's no detailed settings. You cannot rotate it, you cannot create animation. There's no point in that. So the best thing is just adjust it as you like and just leave it as it is. Now you can affect the dirt opacity to make it dark or not. It's more like a contrast of the mask. And then you have a dirt tint amount, which is a color. Well, you can change it. So you can change the tint of this dirt and change its amount. Let me see. Let me just change UV, and you can have it color. See, you can have it colored. And you also can affect roughness and specularity. the reflection on this dirt. That's the dirt. So let's go and check the graph. So there's a separate section here in orange, and so as you can see, dirt has got its own UV tiling, but it's simple. And then you can bypass this and instead use this main tiling for the whole textures and everything else. And then we have this mask texture that you can change, which can be used from different channels. And if this texture contains different dirt in different channel, you can use this node to select it accordingly. But this one has got only one. And then you have a tint color and amount. It was done just like in base color here, like that. And what next? Yeah, then it has got an opacity, which is working in coloration with base color. So that's the dirt add-on for the base color. That's the opacity settings, which works with the whole thing. And there's a settings switch which tells you if you want to use dirt, it automatically goes through the settings and uses this opacity over the dirt. The same goes for the roughness. There's additional add-on, same thing. Yeah, so that's the dirt. Okay, so the next one is emissive, which makes the material to shine, work as light material. So there is a color. You can change it, but first you need to change the intensity to see it. So you raise it, and as you can see, it becomes like a bulb, a light bulb. Here it is, illuminating. And so you can change its color, right? And you can apply a texture if you like. So it will use this texture as mask, and you can. It has got its own UV tiling settings, simple ones, so you can just scale it up or down, or instead you can use the main UV tiling, which will follow the main settings on top here. So let me turn this off. Now you can also use a Fresnel color like in base color that we had before. So instead of yellow, you can use for the inner color as purple, let's say, and for outer color, let's say maybe blue. And you have a setting for the strength of this Fresnel effect, and it'll illuminate environment instead. So that's emissive. Oh yeah, let me check. Yeah, so it also works according with the texture that you apply. So let me check the graph. It's in white color. It doesn't have any texture. So what it does basically, it gives you the color, right? Then you can choose either we use a base color as one color, or we can use a both colors in a Fresnel effect. So we can switch between two. Then you have intensity multiplied, and you can apply the texture if you like, and it'll use the same settings for this texture if you choose to use it. And you also can use yeah, it has got its own UV settings, and instead you can also select to have the main UV settings applied. Yeah, so that's the emissive, and it goes to the emissive color. So now let's talk about clear coat. The clear coat is a specific layer that you can see on the car. For example, on the car paint, there are two layers, one underneath and one on the top. And clear coat is the one that is underneath the bottom layer, and we can create this in Unreal Engine with these materials. So we have it here under number 10 here in this example. But before we go and use this, we need to enable this. We will use another normal layer, so we have to enable that, and we have to enable the material as a clear coat. So first of all, we have to go to Edit and Project Settings, and under the engine, look for the rendering, go down to Materials, and there will be Clear Coat Enable Second Normal. This will enable our second layer normal. That's the first thing we need to do. The second thing, we normally would go to our graph, and under this master material settings, we would enable under the shading modal, we would enable clear coat, and then two options will appear here, clear coat and clear coat roughness. But we're not going to do this through here. Let me bring this back. Instead, we'll do this in instance, in material instance directly. So if you scroll down, you'll have overrides, material property overrides. So we just go to shading model, the same as it was in here, right? Shading model, and you just choose accordingly. We need clear coat, and as you can see, it does change here. The material changes, the quality changes. Select default. See, it does create this double coat effect of metal, like it is on the car. So now we have settings. Let's go back. We have clear coat, so it will be a bottom layer. Another important thing to not forget that whenever you enable those two settings, your first normal that we have here, this normal, when it was like the main bottom layer, it was the only one layer. It becomes the top layer now, because we select this one as a clear coat, and clear coat is the bottom layer, so they swap. So now when we affect these settings, we affect the bottom layer, the main layer. But if we go back and scroll up to the normal, the main normal we had before, now this will affect our top layer. Let me just show this. So we go to clear coat. Let me just select all of this. Oh, we can change the normal texture. We have opacity. So this opacity controls the fade, the opacity of the top layer, so the original layer. So we can hide it or reveal it more. Kind of opacity of the clear coat, so to say. Now, clear coat roughness is the roughness of it, right? So how shiny it is. And there's intensity, so we can make it more intense. As you can see, when we increase intensity, the middle part, the first layer is affected. Now, we can also flatten it, and we can affect its scale. See, when we move this top layer, which we see more in the reflections in the specular, it doesn't move. But when we control the universal UV scale, it does control the inside layer. So here it is a bottom layer, clear coat. We're going to control. We also have all these tiling, UV tiling, scaling settings like we had before in the main one, in the main tiling main UV. And we can also make it move. So if we make it move like we did with the main one, and just apply this. Now it does move. Here it moves, you see. Let me just increase the intensity to see here. So it moves. But the top layer, let me also increase the top layer intensity. Here it doesn't move. Let me also increase its let me decrease its scale. So it doesn't move. You see, the top layer does not move. The inside layer moves. But we could also make the top layer move, and they both will move. But I mean, you will not do this on the object that is not organic or something. This is just an option that you have, but we don't need that. However, what also we can do, this clear coat has got its own UV settings, right? But we can also make it move according to our main tiling instead. So if you take this one, we lose all settings, all detail settings, but it will stay to our original normal texture UV. So if we make this outside layer move, our inside layer will move accordingly with it. And now, as we do that, we probably would like sometimes to change the scale of the inner layer separately, independently. So that's the setting there is at the bottom. So we can also change it. Even though it does move with the first layer, we can still change its scale. So now the graph is purple. What it does basically is we have this texture, clear coat texture, And now we have the same settings actually which we had in the normal, very similar. Intensity, what is it? Flatten. There are different settings. Opacity that goes with a new place here, opacity, and the same for roughness. But before that, we have this. By default, the switch in false, it goes to its own separate UV tiling settings. But you can switch into to original tiling, the main tiling settings, and along with that, you can change the settings of the scale on top of that. So that's the clear code. Okay, so the next one is subsurface scattering. It's also known as triple S. You also have to enable this, but before that, what is subsurface scattering? That's what it is, right? Subsurface scattering of the light, so to say. So, like you see, it's on fingers, you know, it goes through skin, through ears, and so on. That's the effect. It's mostly on organic bodies and so forth, on skin. So you have to enable this first, and we also can do this as we did it with clear coating. So you have to go to the bottom, shading models, and choose subsurface. There are more options, I think. There's a thing with skin. There's a subsurface profile, also foliage, but we use subsurface here. So let's go to the settings and enable everything here. Now we don't see anything because it also needs to have a color, and even if we do change the color, let's see, we don't see much because we need light to accompany this effect. So let's take a light and put this inside of this ball, and if I bring it back to black color, nothing happens. But if we change the color of this subsurface, but make it a little bit darker, to change the color, as you can see inside, we start to see this subsurface effect. But to make it even more clear, let me go and make this object color a little bit darker. This will do. Now it's seen much better. Here, you see, because without subsurface, we would not see this glow effect from inside, like it is on the skin. So it's, if I go and turn this off, see there's nothing there. But if we bring back subsurface, it appears. And what else we have here? Yeah, so we have a density of this effect. See how much it works. Well, as I showed, we can change the color. It also changes the color of the surface. And right. We also can apply texture here, and it'll be affecting the whole surface as well. We can change the size of this texture, right? We can make more controls really. I could make more controls of this UV tiling specifically for this mask, but I don't see the reason why yet. Maybe in the future. Also, you can just, instead of changing one universal scale for this mask, you can just use the main tiling settings for the whole master material that we use. Now, that's the subsurface, and also it affects the light. So whenever you use and move the light, it works from underneath the skin or behind the skin or behind this material in the subject. So if we go to the graph, it'll be on the bottom. It's more like a skin color. So it's very simple, really. There is the texture, the density. So it's kind of the brightness or contrast of this mask that we use. Then we have a switch if we want to use this texture, if or not. Then there's the color of this subsurface effect, and then also we have a simple UV tiling scale. And if we don't want to, we can go and bypass it and use the main UV scale settings in general. So, and then as you can see, when we enable this, we have this string go to subsurface color. That's the one. And I think opacity as well. Opacity also somehow works. Yeah, but it goes through underneath. We'll talk about this later. We will have to switch this, but it also uses the opacity. So yeah, that's the subsurface. Okay, so the next one and the final one is the opacity and translucency. So let's see. So and refraction as well. So we have to enable it first, as always. But before that, we have to choose this one. If we're not going to use subsurface scattering, we need to enable opacity over subsurface scattering. The reason being is that in the master material, subsurface scattering uses opacity of this main node. It goes to opacity here. So for it not to switch it off in the future, I made the switch here so that the translucency can take over when we use the translucency instead of subsurface scattering. I believe there's a better way to do that. Maybe use different. You can use different master materials, or maybe there's options to combine them somehow. But that's the way I do this. Simple one. So whenever I use, instead of subsurface, I use translucency. As you can see, even it loses the options here when I take it. I just click it. Another option we need to do is go back down. Also, we need to turn off our shading model because we don't want subsurface. We need to go to blend mode. And let me talk about a couple translucency options. So one of them is masked. Oh, another thing is whenever you work with translucency, you need to go to the object, type shadow to find it faster, and remove, like there was cast shadow, remove cast shadow, so that the glass would not cast shadow underneath it, because normally, naturally, originally it doesn't. So let's go back. So yeah, we have this opacity and mask. First we use masked. So let's go and use these options here. Now we can use inner opacity, right, to open up it from inside, or outer opacity, so we can make it other way around. Ooh. Kind of ghostish object. Depends what effect you want to achieve. And then there's a Fresnel strength, or the fade out between two, and the same like it is in the Fresnel color. And then of course use simple settings for opacity, but I would not recommend it, just uniform opacity setting. And what else? Yeah, there's a threshold if you didn't use Fresnel, but it's kind of the same. I'm not aware of this. How strong are these? Like random? What is this? I don't know. So you can achieve some interesting effect here. Like this, you know, a bubble. But now there's another option when we work with refraction. No, refraction doesn't work with this mask. So if you choose, instead of a mask, you choose translucent. Let's go back up. And now let's play around. So we have this, that's different now. But for translucency, the threshold on random doesn't work, so you can turn them off. But we can now use refraction. So we have also inner refraction, right? And outer refraction. And we have Fresnel level as well for them, both of them. Let me check the graph. So it's here in white. So we have translucency. We have inner, outer, and opacity Fresnel, right? We have uniformal opacity if you choose to use a simple setting, but I would not advise to. I can actually delete this. So now this switch is the one that takes this opacity and shares it between subsurface and opacity settings. Whichever you use, you have to tick that one. Remember that one? This is the one. So if I turn it on, it just messes everything up. It needs to be on. Now, there's this threshold at random for mask option if you need. And refraction is in black underneath. So it's also inner, outer, and Fresnel, and uniformal for simple settings, but probably I have to delete this as well. So yeah, refraction goes into refraction, and This one is to opacity. Simple as that.